Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.
Hello and welcome to Capes on the Couch, where commies get counseling. I'm Anthony Sitko.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
This is a very special episode. This is issue number 83. We are covering the Canadian hero Northstar, part of Alpha Flight. As this June is Pride Month, we are covering Northstar as an LGBTQ superhero. And we also have a special guest with us, a Canadian and a good friend of the show. We've got Dr. Goku from GuardiansMH. Dr. Goku, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on. It's the honor to be here tonight.
So before we get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about GuardiansMH? I know we've done some collabs on the Mental Health Avengers, but this is the first time we've had one-on-one. I know Doc and I guested on your show, but this is the first appearance by a member of the GuardiansMH crew on Capes on the Couch. So why don't you just give us a quick rundown of who GuardiansMH are and what it is that y'all do?
Well, GuardiansMH is a 501c3 nonprofit. Right now, we're just in the U.S., but we're looking into getting that federal and going outside of the States. We mainly run on Discord, so we have a peer support network there on Discord where people join in, they can get some resources. We also have a team of mental health professionals there that can help answer some questions and help the individual kind of get set up in terms of trying to find a therapist or seeking out meaningful resources for them in their areas.
Yeah, you guys do such amazing work. I'm so proud of everything that you guys do. And it's just an honor to even be somewhat loosely affiliated with you, even if it's just like through the podcast and the occasional Discord stuff. Your RTS bot, the real-time support bot that you have created for Discord is nothing short of outstanding. And we're very glad to have it in our Discord as well.
Yeah, Joe did a really good job with that bot. And now we have an actual programmer that's helping us with it. So we're kind of revamping it even more. And we just made it not long ago a Twitch bot as well. So people that are on Twitch can integrate it into their own streams, and it works pretty much the same way that it does on Discord to bring up the resources. I think it's reaching over 160,000 unique individuals right now.
That's amazing.
It's just you guys are absolutely amazing. I mean, I'm constantly in awe of all the work that you do and the impact that you all have on the gaming community, who is a community that has been largely, I think, underserved by mental health resources. They've been, I don't want to say fully ignored, but certainly underrepresented when it comes to that sort of thing. And we've seen that borne out over the past decades. But I'm glad to see that the tide is turning with mental health assistance for them, as for everyone. And, we talk about that on the Avengers, and you are in no small part a big help, a big part of that. So kudos to you and Joe and Nate and the whole crew over there. You guys are just, like I said, absolutely amazing. So I'd encourage any of our listeners to go find them, GuardiansMH. I don't do the full plugs at the end of the episode, but you can check them out on Discord. There's a lot of overlap, certainly, at least between our listeners and I would say the gamer fan base. So just another couple quick housekeeping items. We have a new patron, my sister Angela. So thank you, Ange. Appreciate your support as always. Love you, and thanks for your help on and off mic. And this week's shout out, keeping in with the theme of Pride Month, we're going to shout out our friends over at Friday the 13th. I looked it up, and we actually hadn't shouted them out before. I I don't seem to recall that we play their plugs in the
Yeah,
episodes, but I
I
don't
was
think
gonna
we've ever
say
actually.
they've been part of our bumpers before. So
No, we've definitely played the bumpers, but we've never actually done like a shout out to them. So again, keeping with the theme for Pride Month, Andrew and Maddie cover horror films and topics with an LGBTQ perspective. So it's a refreshing, always entertaining listen. They just, I love their dynamic, and just the repartee that they have with certain things. So if you're interested in, like I said, if you have an interest in horror movies, or if you're looking for a queer podcast, a queer leaning podcast, check them out there at Frygay13.com. So I'm not going to belabor the point too much more about what we talked about at the start of last week's show. Suffice to say that I'm glad to see that the momentum is continuing, that we are still advancing with a lot of the accountability that is long, long overdue that we're seeing now in organizations and individuals across the country. And Doc Issues had a beautifully written piece that is on our website, capesonthecouch.live. You can check it out. It went live last week, called Forgive Me. And just really speaking to the heart, speaking from the heart, I should say, with a lot of the issues that have impacted him about being a black man in America. And some of the stuff I didn't even know about. And again, I mean, we went to high school together, and it's sort of caused me to re-examine some of the things that I said and did in the past. And, again, we've said this before, as long as you learn and you make better choices moving forward, we're not looking to try and do cancel culture or anything along those lines. Just as long as you acknowledge your mistakes and you do better. When who is it? If you know better, do better.
yeah.
Maya Angelou, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you know better, do better. So that's what it's all about. So hopefully we can slowly change some hearts and minds. But in the meantime, so let's talk Northstar. Jean-Paul Beaubier. Am I saying that
Jean-Paul Beaubier.
Jean-Paul Beaubier. Dr. Goku is not Quebecois, but he certainly has much more experience with Quebecois culture and language.
I am a French Canadian Acadian.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah.
Wow.
The only exposure Doc and I have is when we went to Montreal for a bachelor party.
Yeah, much different goals there and experiences. So yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
we're there to learn about the culture.
A decent amount. It was interesting because I was also, at least I can't speak for Doc. That was my first trip to Canada. So that was my first trip across the border, and just getting to go there. And I had already known that the French that is spoken in Quebec is very different than what you would hear in Paris or in France in general. And I was just doing a little bit of reading about Quebecois and Quebec prior to this episode. And the one thing that I found interesting, and Goku, I don't know how much you can attest to this, but the version of French that is spoken in Quebec is allegedly much more akin to the French that was spoken, say, like 200-300 years ago, because they've been separated from Paris and from France for so long that the changes that were made to the French language, post-revolution and so on and so forth, to quote unquote clean it up, those changes never hit Canada. And also as a result of some of the influx of the obviously English-speaking Canadians, as well as the American influence, that the version that is spoken in Quebec is much more, it's hews closer to colonial French than what you would hear in current modern day France now.
Yeah, so in France, it's more of the scholarly French, whereas within Quebec, or even here with Acadian French, it's more of the old school, the farmers, the shipwrights, the fishermen. So kind of the lower people that colonized the country here, and it kind of stuck and got molded and modified with native speak, and then modified with people coming from England, and everything going on throughout the years now.
Fascinating. Yeah, it's always been interesting. And like I said, I knew when we were going to Montreal that I was going to hear very different, because I didn't take French in high school or grammar school or whatever. Doc and I took Spanish,
Right.
and of course, we don't remember anything from there. but I was aware that it was going to be a different flavor of French, akin to like saying that Portuguese that you hear in Portugal versus Portuguese that you hear in Brazil.
Yeah.
It's a different it's a different flavor, but it was interesting. So now that we got that cultural history lesson out of the way, Northstar, Jean-Paul Beaubier, created by Chris Claremont and John Byrne in Uncanny X-Men number 120, April 1979. If I ever speak to Chris Claremont again, I'll ask him about Northstar.
Are you sure? Are you sure that Claremont is going to be willing to talk to you, considering how fired up he got the last time?
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. I don't know if I would want to speak to Chris Claremont again. I just don't know whether or not Chris Claremont would want to talk to me. But in any case, and I also feel like John Byrne would have much more to say about Northstar and Alpha Flight in general. He had much, much more of a heavy hand in that. Claremont only had an input because of the X-Men books. Once they went to Alpha Flight, it was all John Byrne. But in any case, so Jean-Paul Beaubier and his twin sister Jeanne-Marie are born to French-Canadian parents in Montreal, but his parents die in a car crash shortly thereafter, and the twins ends up separated. And then at the age of 6, his adoptive parents are killed very similarly. So now he goes through foster care. And so, I mean, that right off the bat, he's got a very tragic background. Despite all of this, he takes an interest in skiing, and he becomes a champion level skier. And then as a teen, his mutant powers manifest in puberty, as they often do in these stories, flight, durability, and super speed. And then he joins the Quebec separatist movement until he feels that they've become a little too heavy-handed, and he really sort of denounces the terroristic aspects of that separatist movement. And I know Dr. Goku, again, you can give us a little bit of a history lesson there. This is rooted in real stuff that happened, at least at the time of the books. This was in like the 70s, that era. And I know we were talking offline before we got started that there was another big push for Quebec separatism in the 90s. And then I think it wasn't that long ago that there was another referendum. I want to say like maybe 2013-ish. I may be off by a little bit there.
It's a little bit ongoing. There's still like a sub part of the population of Quebec that wants to separate from Canada and make Quebec their own country. Would just make it rather difficult, as Canada is a really large country, and 3 out of the provinces would need to go through Quebec to go to mid-Canada or to out west. So it would make things a little bit more problematic for people out east here.
But I do like that they were able to root some of his character in that real life, history. I think it adds a little bit of a realism and a flavor to Jean-Paul. So then he joins Alpha Flight, the Canadian superhero team, where he's reunited with Jeanne-Marie. She goes by Aurora, and he becomes Northstar. And so their powers work in concert with each other, that when they are together, they're able to generate light, and they can help each other fly. But then working with Jeanne-Marie sort of sours their relationship, and then they become estranged for some time, which again, they were separated through most of their childhood. And then so finally, as a young adult, he gets reunited with his sister, and then he becomes jealous for a time over her relationship with Sasquatch, who is the Canadian Hulk-esque member of Alpha Flight, if he's sort of their analog. But then they end up reconciling after they fight a villain that requires the full force of Alpha Flight.
I remember.
So I'm
just interrupting briefly, only because the fact that they had that falling out temporarily, that was based on Northstar accusing his sister of, no other way to say it, sleeping her way out of situations. So she didn't take kindly to that.
Because Jeanne-Marie had a really difficult upbringing herself.
Yeah, Jeanne-Marie deals with the multiple personalities. I think that Aurora is definitely a character that we can delve into deeply on a future episode, and we'll certainly call back to this one. And I know Doc is going to love getting to talk about multiple personalities.
Oh yeah, my favorite,
because that's just his favorite topic on these shows, especially with these characters. So now we come to the famous issue Alpha Flight 106. Now I should add that Jean-Paul was always intended to be homosexual, but given the Comics Code Authority and given the heavy hand of Jim Shooter, who was the editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics through most of the 80s, you couldn't really be overt with the homosexual references, and he couldn't be out and proud. So moving, again, as we said, I think this is in 1992. So keep that in mind. This is almost 30 years ago at this point. The landscape for homosexuals in 1992 was very different than it is now. You know, we're looking at it in 2020 with the lens of Ellen DeGeneres and the great strides that homosexuals and transgender folks and the entire LGBTQ community has seen vast strides in representation in mass media. In 1992, there weren't a whole lot of positive representatives for the LGBTQ community. You know, keep in mind they were just coming out of the AIDS pandemic of the 80s, and AIDS was still at that time really being thought of as the gay flu. And, you know, I'm saying these things not that I believe them, but this is what was being said. This is how it was being spoken of at the time, that AIDS and HIV were gay diseases and so on and so forth. And there was a dearth of understanding.
Right. Well, I'll go even a step further than that. It isn't just a matter of homosexuality. This is a situation when I was looking at programs, not for psychiatry, just in general. I was the type of nerd that would look at other fields. One of the internal medicine factors for just about every program, they would point out whether or not they had a dedicated HIV service so that your education wouldn't solely be taken up by patients that were hospitalized due to other acquired diseases through HIV, through the immunosuppression and having AIDS. So that's just how prominent it was. And whether or not you were asking about homosexuality, it was something that, to be blunt, even the medical environment thought that this may be something that truly puts humanity in jeopardy. That's how much the fear-mongering was.
Yeah, it was a huge thing. So
if we look on the psychological aspect, it was part of the DSM for years.
Yeah.
Thank God they finally took that out.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the two of you would obviously know better than that, but even I know that for years homosexuality was considered a mental disorder, and the treatment of homosexuals and again, members of the LGBTQ community in this country and across the world still has a good long way to go. But I mean, where we are now versus 1992 is a world of difference. So keeping that in mind is the sort of the background. We don't normally do deep dives into a single issue on this, but I feel like given how prominent this is both for Northstar as a character and also just in the history of comics, I'm just going to give a brief overview. So Alpha Flight is fighting Dr. Hyde, or Mr. Hyde, and Jean-Paul hears a baby in an alley, and they were just in a garbage can, just abandoned in an alley. So he brings the baby to the hospital, where they find out that the baby was abandoned because it tested HIV positive and the baby has AIDS. So Northstar, who is a celebrity at this point because he is a champion skier, he has brought fame and glory to Canada through skiing, etc. Plus, he's a superhero. So he adopts the baby, Jeanne, I believe, Joanne or Jeanne. I don't remember the specific baby's name, but so he adopts her, and she becomes this cause that Northstar is fighting to help save this baby. Meanwhile, there's an older gentleman who's watching these news reports, and he is just seething with anger, and so he goes to the hospital and he attacks Northstar. And he reveals himself as Major Maple Leaf, who was a hitherto unknown Canadian superhero from, say, the 50s or 60s. Basically, the Canadian government's attempt to engineer their own version of Captain America. And so he had retired at this point and raised a family. And he reveals to Northstar that his son was gay and died of AIDS and was just nothing more than a statistic. And that he's angry at Northstar and the media for saying that, oh, this child is innocent. You're all loving this poor baby that is innocent with AIDS. What about my son? What about my boy? And so he starts attacking Northstar. And this is when Northstar reveals to Major Maple Leaf that I'm gay. And so, I'm sorry that your son went through all of this. And then Major Maple Leaf turns around and he's like, well, if you're gay, then why don't you come out and use your celebrity as a voice for the homosexual community, for AIDS awareness and so on. So the whole story doesn't have a happy ending because unfortunately the baby does die. But Jean-Paul uses this as an opportunity to out himself publicly to Canada and the world as a homosexual. And so this is, like I said, in 1992, this was huge. Again, this is like 3-4 years, two or 3 years before Ellen DeGeneres.
Right. I was going to say, didn't that sell out? Even though it was never a frontline trade. I mean, I
believe it did. Yeah. I believe Alpha Flight. Alpha Flight 106.
Right. That's how popular it became. Out.
Yeah. Because Alpha Flight wasn't that big of a comic book, even up here in Canada. It was there, but people here read Batman, Superman, the X-Men.
Yeah.
So again, here in the States, Alpha Flight is like, oh, we're giving the Canadians their book back. Okay, we're going to give them another shot at Alpha Flight. So like I said, we don't normally do a deep dive into a single issue unless we're doing like a Patreon review. But for something, for this issue, which had such magnitude, both personally for Jean-Paul as well as the comics industry as a whole, I kind of felt it was important to touch upon that. So moving forward, Jean-Paul ends up he gets recruited to the X-Men by Jean Grey to help save Professor Xavier from Magneto, who has imprisoned Charles on Genosha. And then Northstar becomes a teacher at the Xavier Institute. Then he gets killed by a brainwashed Wolverine, and he gets resurrected by Hydra, who brainwash him and his sister. And I think he dies like 3 times in the span of about a year because he's killed and resurrected and then killed and resurrected and killed. And
comics.
Because comics by the t-shirt. So they both end up getting mentally repaired by the X-Men, who use the Danger Room to help sort of get them to dig through their trauma and go through everything that they have individually and collectively gone through. So then Jean-Paul says, I'm gonna go back to sports because I get sort of tired of the superhero gig, and he decides to go back. And now this is like late 90s, early 2000s ish, and he uses his own vulnerability and his speed to become an extreme sports star. So he's like the X Games with the snowboarding, and the one issue he's snowboarding at Mach 1. To like break the sound barrier on a snowboard because he can do it because friction isn't a thing because comics. So after the Marauders brainwash the X-Men and kidnap his boyfriend Kyle, he realizes life is short and he doesn't want to waste it, so he marries Kyle. And this was, I want to say, about 8 or so years ago.
Yeah, around 2012.
I want to say it was about 2012. Yep. And that issue also sold out. And he's been in and out of X-Men comics a little bit here and there. And he is currently living on Krakoa with the other mutants and Jeanne-Marie. No word on Kyle, but as of the new Jonathan Hickman sort of revamp of the entire X-Men mythos, they did reveal that Northstar and Aurora are on Krakoa, but they don't mention anything about Kyle. And I don't know if Kyle is welcome to live on Krakoa with Northstar because Kyle is not a mutant.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how they're going to address that. And I was just checking up on like the Marvel fandom page to see the most recent appearances of Northstar.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like cameos or mentions here and there. He hasn't really been part of any major storylines in a while. So that was one of the longer backgrounds we did. We got some French-Canadian history in there. We got some linguistic discussions and, a single issue review. By the way, I read Alpha Flight 106 and I cried. It was just so beautifully written. And maybe part of it was because, I've got a young son and the whole idea of losing a baby, it hit me. But it was just, like I said, the way it was written, 28 years later, it still has impact. So the issues. So let's dive into the first one. This is more for when he was younger, but Jean-Paul tends to be a little impulsive and hot-headed. And even prior to his marriage, it was one of those things where he just realizes, you know what? I'm just going to go for this. I'm just going to marry Kyle. And he proposes to Kyle, and Kyle says no initially. And then Kyle agrees. And then Jean-Paul is like, well, now are you sure you want to do this? And Kyle's like, yes, I'm sure I want to get married. But this impulsivity and this hot-headedness, it seems to be kind of a recurring theme among speedsters. Because Quicksilver, I know for one, is certainly another example of that.
Yeah, I was going to say different versions, depending on who you're talking about with the Flash. There's examples, sure.
So let's talk about that, the impulsivity and the hot-headedness for a bit, because that, I think his power set reflects in his mentality. And then he's like, I'm go fast. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to go here. Zoom, 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 zoom. And his internal thoughts reflect that similarly, which can be good, but can also get him into a spot of trouble, as we've seen over the last 30-something years. So I'll let the two of you take the wheel on that.
Okay, so I can tell you my initial thoughts looking at his background are that when you have several losses of people that are important in your life, and you end up with what I would like to consider a scarcity mindset, the idea that joy is fleeting, things are always changing, always temporary, live in the moment. Right now, we have YOLO and FOMO in that sense. And so it can be a defense mechanism where you don't have to take the time to stop and grieve or worry about what the consequences are to certain actions if you act on what you think is going to produce a positive result. So in his case, he was set up where, yeah, they want him to use his powers. Okay, cool. What do you want me to do? I'll do it right now. Anything you need. Okay, I'm there. I don't even have to put in the extra effort in terms of planning, coordination, because he is literally so fast that anything that anyone would consider to be a mistake, he can probably catch before they do. And actually, I'm going to take this to a personal level where if I were talking about a certain topic in high school, and Anthony, I think you'll relate to this too, depending on what was going on, if a teacher called on you and you didn't quite know the answer, sometimes you could kind of BS your way through it. And the idea was you took whatever skill you had in the moment and you made it sound articulate, even though you weren't really saying anything. In this case, it was brought up, the idea that
I don't know what you're talking about. That's never happened to me. I've never done that. I publicly disavow any knowledge of this. Damn you for bringing it up.
What I'm getting at is, I'm gonna. Sorry, it's a swear here, but it's if you can't dazzle them with your brilliance, you'll baffle them with your bullshit. So it's obvious that Northstar has a lot of talent, and he's able to use it so well that even when he was originally accused of cheating, he kind of played it off when he was skiing, and then eventually he comes to terms with it. But he's like, well, does it really matter? I mean, I do what I want. I don't have to worry about anything because I know nothing's going to happen. And even if it does happen, I'll just move on to the next thing. So it shifts consequences to a level where you don't even have to put forth the emotional energy and the mental energy to go further with any processes. That's my quick read of it. No pun intended.
Kind of like an impulse control aspect where even though he does something, before it gets too bad, he can kind of correct it.
Mm-hmm.
So related to that, then moving into the second issue, he tends to be a little bit of an extremist. And we see that in his youth joining the Quebec separatist movement. And I just want to be clear here. I'm not necessarily saying that anybody who's in the Quebec separatist movement is an extremist, just that he took it to an extreme and then backed off when he realized, okay, this is too much even for me. But again, I think it ties into that impulsivity. And Doc and I, we've done countless characters on the show at this point that are extremists. And I myself can be a bit of an extremist, which I'm not always proud of, but it's one of those things like I try and be cognizant of it, but it is what it is at this point.
So I'll try and make this one a little briefer than compared to what I said before to give our guests a little more time. The bottom line is, when you think that your current situation in society has no voice, you're going to do your best to be heard. I'm not going to even try to give examples of the many people in history that have shown that potentially that can work. Sometimes for better and sometimes for worse. But at least with Northstar, I could say that it's clear he always wanted things to be better than they were. And that level of intent is something I'll say can be a positive example. But I think sometimes, to go back to the first thing, the ramifications of trying to create wholesale changes to all of society because of what you see as like the very first domino. In other words, if you can't see the next 2 or 3 steps as to how everyone's going to be affected, or at least account for them, then you're changing lives way beyond any one thing that you were trying to address. So in other words, if you are a one-note party, which is more common in a lot of other countries compared to the United States, where we have 2 major parties, but I'm not going to get into all that. The point is, the idealism can be amazing, but the practicality is where we could see massive problems. And if you don't have the type of interpersonal supports that will allow you to have a stable mind when it comes to these things, then you end up with a lot of potential anger, potential sadness. Basically, it mimics the movement. The extremes of behavior can lead to the extremes of emotion.
I think with a lot of the speedsters, and certainly with Northstar, he's very intense. And when he gets intense, he kind of puts everything inside and kind of jumps in with both feet. Knowing that if something goes wrong, he can easily sidestep or correct things. Almost like that fearless nature. And I've seen it a lot with some of my clients where, given certain things going on, they will do without thinking of the consequences, because in their mind at that time, it's the best course of action.
Sounds, I was going to say it sounds legit, but I mean, it kind of hits me a little bit personally, and I know Doc is laughing his ass off right there. Yeah, I see you. I see you. Yeah, I know. Mm-hmm. No, it's okay. And I'll be the first to admit it. I feel like I jump in sometimes head first into the shallow swimming pool. Doesn't matter how little bit of water there is. There's a little bit of water in there. Therefore, I'm going to dive in. Doesn't matter the risk of paralysis or disfigurement to my person whatsoever. Doesn't matter what it's going to do to me emotionally, mentally, spiritually, what have you. I'm just going to do it. I think I've gotten better as I've gotten older.
Yes, you have.
But well, thank you. Thank you for that. But it took a lot of getting burned. And I will say that, again, I do think that from what I've been able to read of Northstar in the week that, I've been reading the Alpha Flight and X-Men comics, he does grow, and the edges do get sanded down some. This goes to, both point A and B, that he does get smarter. And I think a lot of that has to do with his relationship with Kyle, is that being with Kyle makes him realize that he can't just dive in head first. He can't just do that without thinking, because he has someone else to think of. He has that better half, so to speak, to keep him grounded, no pun intended. And that it does help a lot. And I've noticed myself, and again, I'll credit my wife to some of this, that when you have somebody else to think about in those types of situations, it does give you pause. And especially now as a parent, and I mean, all three of us, we've got kids here. It gives you a different perspective to think about when you have somebody else in your life that you need to live for and you need to think about. So I think I don't want to say dulled him, because he's not a duller character. He's wiser. I'll put it that way. I think he's wizened as he's gotten older. The impulsive, brash, skier, crazy extremist is not the same guy that he is now. He's still going to help first, think second, but it's with a better heart, I would say. And that goes to the third issue. And so we're segueing real good here. So he uses his personal and private information and his history to advance a larger cause, which in theory and largely in practice is a very positive thing. But it does create the potential for significant interpersonal conflicts. And one of the things that I want to draw attention to is when he joins the X-Men, when he's recruited by Jean to help the X-Men, he comes into conflict with this new mutant, Paulie Provenzano, who goes by Omerta, and as an Italian, I just go, God damn it. Just hate. Because, no, like seriously, as an Italian from northern New Jersey, I have family that are that stereotype, that are like, you see The Godfather, The Sopranos, all those like mafia type shows. People think that's fake. That shit's real. It's less real now than it was, but that was my mother's like cousins growing up as a kid. I got stories about things that happened in my family that you would go, no, I saw that episode of The Sopranos. Yeah, that was Paulie Walnuts. No, that was my cousin Paulie. Never mind. But anyway, I digress. So he encounters this very machismo, Italian, stereotypical, goomba. And he's like, I'm not hanging out with some fairy or limp-wristed, whatever the term was that he used. He didn't go full F-bomb on him there, probably because the Comics Code wouldn't have allowed it. But he does, make numerous allegations that Jean-Paul is somehow less masculine because he is homosexual. And then, of course, Jean-Paul beats the snot out of him. He's like, oh, okay. This is what you want to go, tough guy? All right. And drills him in the face repeatedly with his fists. So these are just some of the things that happen. And it's part of the unfortunate burden that is carried by LGBTQ people, much less high profile superheroes like that. And so that's just one instance of some of the issues that he deals with. And that's not so much an issue for Jean-Paul, but as we've said repeatedly, it's not your fault, but it is your problem. And the problem is it's not Jean-Paul's to fix, but it is something that he has to deal with.
Yeah. This is something that I think is playing out right now in many different ways in society. It's very clear. I'll admit, I was giving my personal experience previously not because it was to make me feel better. It was because I wanted to make sure first, if anybody had that experience, that they recognize that they weren't alone. And also, sometimes personal experiences of a human being that you at least can relate to on some superficial level in another capacity can allow for a deeper understanding in the future, even if they don't recognize it in the moment. So a character doing something like that is not, at this point, not uncommon, but it doesn't have to be on that large a scale. If you are the only person that you know within your inner circle of people that you consider to be confidants, and you come out as gay, as an example, there is no guarantee. I would like to say that we now have the perfect playbook. This is the social acceptance playbook for everything you need to do right so that everyone that cares about you is going to continue to see you the same way. We still haven't figured that out yet. And so every time someone does this, it's a potential to not just have conflict, but to quite literally have negative consequence. And it's something it's always a risk.
It's a big stressor for people that want to come out. It racks their brains for months or years. I have a client who first came out as gay. That was one thing for her. And then came out as trans. And that was a whole other ballgame. Knowing that the reception they had coming out as gay wasn't the best, then coming out as trans was a whole nother issue. And this was even within her own family.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even with the times now, we were talking to someone earlier today or yesterday that they're having issues within their own families in terms of which side certain people are taking.
Mm-hmm.
And it's creating rifts and divisions within families.
Yeah. Yeah. And not to get too dark on this, but there's also the potential, even if there was no history of violence, abuse, persecution directly towards that person before, depending on the culture, depending on the backgrounds, then
how much they identify with their identity.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the idea also, not to make it, once again, I guess we are just peeling back the layers. There are going to be circumstances where you're coming out to one group, one situation to a certain group of people. You mentioned family. What about to circles of friends that don't have contact with your family? So you're going to have that conversation, if you choose to have that conversation with other people. What if this is a situation where in your workplace you don't feel comfortable? You now have to find a way to somehow separate your workspace from anyone that interacts with anyone that would see you outside of work. It just becomes this very complicated, multi-layered emotional trap box. It's something that if anyone has gone through therapy for it, it's fascinating to see, because I know I've had patients that, will literally come to the emergency room once or twice a year because they had a different interaction with someone that they considered to be a confidant or someone that they thought would be totally understanding, and they weren't. And so this is something that in theory can be a relived trauma over and over. And like I said, there is no clean playbook for this. Every situation is going to be unique.
And I've heard from several family and friends, LGBTQ, that coming out is never just a one-time thing, that they have to come out almost with every person they meet or with every interaction they have. They're constantly coming out. So it's like a scab that never heals, because you're constantly having to pick at it and you're constantly having to address, okay, this person doesn't know I'm gay. This person doesn't know I'm lesbian. This person doesn't know I'm trans, what have you, that you constantly have to go through that over and over again. And as you were both saying, that if you don't have a history of positive interactions, that you just have to relive that trauma over and over again. And it can almost create a PTSD-like environment, because you have to keep reliving that trauma. And that's why, we see the rate for LGBTQ teen suicides, particularly among the trans community, is much higher than it is for cisgendered heterosexual people, because they have to deal with this trauma over and over again, because they come out to family, friends. They may have a confidant that they think is going to go well, not to get too personal, but one of my sister's best friends came out to her in high school, and that was fine. And his family did not have the best time accepting him, and not to get too into it, but he is no longer with us. So that is something that, just in my personal life and that experience of having to deal with that, it's incredibly difficult. And as we said, it's just going to keep happening over and over again until such time as we can hopefully advance society enough that it's not a thing, that we can get rid of heteronormativity. And that's pie in the sky thinking. And that's I don't know what it's going to take. I don't certainly think it's going to happen in our lifetimes, but I do think just even in the 38 years that I've been on this planet, it's certainly been better. And I'm hoping that it continues to fight this way. And some of the things that we're seeing now in, society and things happening in the U.S., that we are continuing to push this dialogue of acceptance and accountability. And we are saying that we are not going to accept anything less than full equality. And we're going to fight for it. And we're going to continue to push for it, that whether it's Black Lives Matter or whether it's the gay rights community, whether it's any number of minorities that are being impacted. And I'm saying this again as, a cisgendered heterosexual white male that might as well just have the man tattooed right on my forehead. As I say all the time, I'm as privileged as it gets. And I'm saying, please, I'm elevating as much as I can minority voices in the hopes that we can one day potentially achieve a world in which stuff like this doesn't happen, where someone like Jean-Paul doesn't have to have these negative interactions, that, even if he does come out to somebody that he doesn't know, that it's just in like offhanded thing. Oh, and here's my husband. Oh, okay, cool. And, move on like, oh, okay. And, are you a Rangers fan or Devils fan? Like, I hope that one day it's viewed at in that sort of thing. Although I don't necessarily want to say that, because Rangers and Devils fans tend to fight over stuff. So, and I say that as a Devils fan.
Oh, well.
So, but you get my point.
Yes.
I hope, anyway, at least as eloquently as three cisgendered heterosexual men can have this sort of point talking about an LGBTQ perspective. Maybe next time we talk about a gay character, we'll bring on someone from the LGBTQ community to give us their perspective. But in any case, let's take a short break. We'll plug a couple of shows, and when we come back, we'll get into treatment. Stay tuned.
Hey, it's good old boy Mike.
This is good old boy Dave.
From Sips, Suds, and Smokes. Sips, Suds, and Smokes covers wine, tea, coffee, distilled spirits, whiskey, scotch, beer, cigars.
People whose first name starts with Q.
Bad fake British accents.
And we always take time to make fun of the people of Alabama.
Banned once again.
It's a 1-hour episode that's mildly entertaining for about 22 minutes.
I think mildly would be a vast improvement.
Well, we do have the only beer show with the Holy Man. We talk about these products and rate them with our unique rating system, like our Suds 5 rating. Do you really have something better to do with your life for an hour than actually listen to this show?
Well, don't make them think about it.
Well, join us on this radio station, podcast network, or via our Android app.
Hey podcast fans, I'm Rachel, host of We're All Mad Here, a new podcast about the history of mental health. Do you love history? Do you love creepy stories of abandoned hospitals? How about questionable medical procedures? We're covering it all. Not only will we sneak around in old asylums, we'll talk about the patients that stayed there and what their lives were like. We're covering disorders, cures, and living life with mental illness. So come join us on We're All Mad Here at allmadpod.com, because the history of mental illness is insane.
Hello, I'm Chris Claremont. You're listening to Capes on the Couch.
And we're back. So let's get into treatment, starting as we always do with in-universe. What would your recommendations be for treatment of Northstar, in universe, given his history?
So the first thing I would need him to do is slow down. I don't think it's a matter of just psychologically saying that. Whatever it would take. I don't know if there are other powerful beings that can help with that. I don't know if Iceman would want to jump on something like that, like even if it's a matter of just getting in a block of ice and say, you can't move for a little while. Anything that gives like a certain amount of time so that his brain can catch up. Not saying that as an insult, just the fact that he does everything so quickly. No one else can react to what he does unless he gives them the opportunity. So it's not just for him, it's for everyone around him. So that's my main thought. I don't think it has to be more complicated than that to start.
So some impulse control issues.
Yeah.
So looking at it in terms of a clinical aspect, something like DBT could be very, very beneficial in terms of recognizing those emotions and regulating those behaviors. So stopping himself from reacting before it kind of gets too late.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's funny that you bring up Iceman because Bobby...
You picked up on that, didn't you?
Oh, I absolutely did. Bobby, as a fellow gay mutant, has a history of dealing with Jean-Paul and his own struggles in coming out and so on. And even before it was really announced that Bobby was gay, they had a sort of contentious relationship. I confess I haven't read all of the more recent X-Men books, so I'm not exactly sure what their current relationship is, but at least as of maybe about 7 or 8 years ago or so, there was just a little bit of banging heads with each other. So I just find it interesting that you would reference bringing in Bobby to help him with his therapy. I think that's an interesting choice. So, and yes, I did pick up on that. Interesting. All right. So out of universe then, I mean, a gay extreme sports athlete who is just very impulsive, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's fairly easy to strip out the power set and just look at Jean-Paul or a real life Jean-Paul and say, what are some of the things that we can do to help address some of his issues?
Right. I think Dr. Goku hit it right on the head. Thinking of something like DBT to, really start getting focus for the person. I'm going to go ahead and leap out in terms of the medical side of things, because what I end up seeing with patients like this is they may or may not have done some of their own homework. Dr. Google can be an interesting friend or foe. And so the very first thing that I get from patients like this is, well, doc, I have ADHD and I most definitely need a stimulant. I need, methylphenidate or mixed amphetamine salts. I'm doing my best not to use brand names here. But I'll go ahead and do it because I think everybody at this point, it's ubiquitous within society, at least in the US, like Ritalin or Adderall. Those are the two main things that people end up asking for.
There's Vyvanse, which is kind of the up and comer.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. There's also alternatives that are still considered medication management. Bupropion is one that's commonly used for attention deficit. There's also a non-amphetamine such as, I'll go ahead, once again, I'll just use the brand names as people know it anyway, Strattera. So there's different opportunities there. And the only reason I'm bringing it up is because it's not a category that I have typically brought up on the broadcast before. So I just wanted to take the opportunity. I'm not totally against them. I just want to point out that there are some risks associated with them. First of all, there's the possibility of diversion. And what that means is sometimes people take, get the prescription, but they don't actually take them for themselves. They either just for the sake of trying to help other people will give it to friends. That's me being very nice. But in all honesty, some people sell them. There's a reason why they became so popular.
I knew a kid back in high school that did that.
Yeah. And so there's that risk. And then there's the actual risk with the medication itself. Depending on the age of the person, it does affect a person's development potentially. That includes growth. I've had patients run the full gamut. I've had people develop obsessions. I've had people develop outright, this is going to sound surprising, develop outright psychosis, actual hallucinations. The most interesting one was a person that was convinced that their family was attacking them. And in order to figure out how they were controlling them, they dismantled every electronic device in their household. So these things are not without risk. At the same time, though, I have had plenty of patients that have had significant benefits. So I just figured I'd bring that to the attention of our listeners, so I don't want to make it sound totally one way or the other. Like, yes, can be a benefit, but also, be very careful, make sure that you're using it properly. And now we have what's called prescription monitoring. So no, you can't just say that you lost your pills or they magically ended up being flushed down the toilet. We've heard it all and we do know what's going on.
Because ADHD medication, I know here up in Canada, is a controlled substance.
Correct. Yeah.
So Goku, Dr. Goku, what about some of your recommendations or your suggestions? Is there anything you would do maybe slightly differently or in addition to what Doc Issues is suggesting?
So the ADHD aspect is pretty prevalent there. With most speedsters, they have that hyperactivity. But I'm also seeing, and with a lot of the characters that we kind of delve into, is trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So often, and I talk about this with my clients as well, is most people focus on the capital T trauma that is defined within the DSM-5.
Mm-hmm.
But I tend to focus more on the lowercase t traumas, where it be a variety of childhood experiences, bullying, loss, grief. And we see with Jean-Paul, he has gone through so much throughout his life.
Absolutely. Yeah. We didn't even really get into that as much as I think we could have, and as far as in the background and the issues, but the loss of not only his birth parents, but then also his adoptive parents before the age of 10 is horrific. And
and then being on the streets and I think he was in a thief guild for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Potentially. But I mean, just again, bringing this back to out of universe, a real life person who loses both their biological parents and then their adoptive parents before the age of 10. That's a big T trauma and a little T trauma. That's just, that's horrifying. And, so to think about some of the ways that we could address those issues.
Right. Not to mention he, lost contact with his sister and then regained that contact.
And then became estranged.
Twin identity is so important for twins. It's part of their identity. And him not knowing he was a twin for the better part of his life is just missing a part of himself.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot going on there, a lot to unpack.
And we know that multiple childhood traumas has a significant impact on the developing brain.
Definitely. So
those impulse control issues could very well be some manifestations of trauma there as well.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think there's any question that the impulse control and all of the hot-headed and the temper issues that he deals with are, I don't want to say a direct result, but certainly can be tied, at least in no small part, to the trauma that he suffered and the losses. And I think maybe to some extent it's that need of, I want it now because it may be gone tomorrow. looking at it from that aspect, that going through those kinds of losses of his parents and the people who cared for him, then he's going to say, well, whatever it is that I want, I'm going to do it now because I may not get another chance to get it again. So I'm just going to live in the moment. And I think that may be directly responsible for at least that aspect of his personality for Jean-Paul. And then obviously any real person who goes through that kind of a loss or those kinds of losses at a young age is going to have that kind of a mindset. So with all of that being said, we're going to I'm going to step aside in one of the rare cases here, and I'm going to let Dr. Goku step in and play the role of Jean-Paul Beaubier, and let's see what happens when we get Northstar on Dr. Issues' couch.
Hello, Jean-Paul. I'm Dr. Issues.
Hello, Doctor.
Well, thank you for coming. I understand there are some scheduling conflicts. I know you're very busy.
The Team Northstar tour is going great. We're selling out everywhere we go, and the fans couldn't be hairier. Ça coche, là.
Well, that's all well and good, but how are you doing?
All right. I guess. I feel fine. I'm here because it seems like the type of thing I'm supposed to do.
I don't hear that often. What do you mean, supposed to do?
Well, I've had some odd things happen in my life, and I've never really talked to someone about it. So I figured that it was good for my sister. Ben là, je peux pas être un hypocrite.
Oh, while I'm flattered that you think so highly of mental health treatment, I don't want to take up too much time chit-chatting if it doesn't suit your needs. Do you have any more specific goals that you would like to work on?
I have some questions about the process. Qu'est-ce que la procédure? Is it painful, like torture?
Nope. That's a bit startling to ask.
You don't know what types of psychological warfare exists, or perhaps you do know, and that's why you come across so unassuming. With your therapy, decrease my mental resilience?
I would hope not. That would be the opposite of what I propose to do for most people.
How will my mutant powers be affected by the treatment?
They shouldn't be. I noticed a pattern in your questions. You're worried that I'll make you weaker somehow. Why is that?
Anyone that has manipulated my mind has done so for their own benefit. I never want to go through that again. I can't afford to. I have some people I love. I have people that love me. Fans adore me.
Okay, let's clarify a few things. First, I don't manipulate minds. I help people discover their personal emotional spectrum and sharpen their tools in managing life situations. Second, I can't imagine the type of pain you suffered. That must have been excruciating, and I'm glad you survived. Third, I'm glad you have a focus that's bigger than yourself, especially with personal relationships. Are we on the same page now?
Maybe. I need to know that you'll be able to give me some strong vote of confidence.
I have no clue what you're talking about.
You know, I'm always part of some major organizations.
Sure. So
I really need someone who can give me a clean bill of health and let the public know that I'm fit to serve in all capacities. Alpha Flight, X-Men, S.H.I.E.L.D., X Games, whoever needs me, je suis le gars.
In layman's terms, you want the equivalent of a return to work notice?
That's the best thing you can do for me right now. I can answer anything you want as long as you'll give me that reassurance.
Well, I don't rubber stamp evaluations. If you want an honest assessment, you'll get it. But I'll need to know your parameters of work. Like, how many hours in general do you log in a typical week?
In normal hours or near light speed hours?
Normal is fine.
6?
You only do 6 hours of work?
That's why I made the distinction. When you do things fast, you don't need that much time. The workload that's expected in that time is the equivalent of a small nuclear explosion.
I'm starting to think I'm ill-equipped to handle this assessment. I took physics years ago, and it wasn't the quantum variety.
My point is, anybody I team with expects me to do what they want, how they want it. If I'm not the one taking the brunt of the responsibility, that's not right, Doctor.
How long have you felt this way?
In normal time, or
just normal time, please.
Well, no matter how you time it, I felt like this longer than I can care for. I want respect. I command respect.
Are you sure? It's starting to sound like you command attention.
Say, I'm not a glory hog. I've worked hard for everything, sometimes harder than anyone expected me to. When do I get my reward for the fruits of my labor?
I have no idea. I mean, you've made numerous assumptions of others with what you just said. I mean, how do I know what your effort is compared to those around you? Do they give you feedback?
Things have been tense in the past. Cette valeur, my own sister hated me once. I've learned my lessons. I've come out publicly to raise AIDS awareness. I've given up gold medals. When is the sacrifice enough?
I still have no idea. I mean, you're not going to get a different answer from me. You're going to have to find that answer for yourself. In fact, that's such a poignant question. I think it should be the focus of your therapy. You have to find out what enough means for you. Like, forget external labels. Ignore the noise. You said you don't want to be a hypocrite. Fine. Don't talk about the fantasy of splitting the positives from the negatives. If you want to rest on your laurels, okay, fine, but accept that you'll be doing less in total. If you want to carry the weight of the world, be prepared to train for a Herculean task.
I know Hercules, and he's really...
That's not my point.
I understand. You have much to discuss for our next session.
Oh, I'm glad you agree for the need of next session.
But you'll have to speak to Kyle. I may not be here for several months. The show must go on.
I wouldn't expect anything different.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Goku, for a fantastic job as Jean-Paul, and it's just been a real honor and a lot of fun having you on the show. And hopefully we could do this again if the next time we have a Canadian character pops up. I don't know if there are any Acadian characters. I'm sure you may know more than we.
Not in traditional comic sense, but...
All right. Well, I promise you, if there's ever an Acadian Canadian character that we cover, we'll bring you back on the show. And you'll be tasked with voicing them once again, and also because of your obvious your skills as a mental health professional, not just because you're Canadian, but also that.
Well, thanks for having me on. It was an honor to be on the show because I've been listening to you guys for a while, and when you got to put out that call for the Mental Health Avengers, and it just seemed so fitting to bring in all of these different podcasts, kind of touching on the same thing but different things at the same time. Yeah,
everybody's got a different angle. Everybody brings something different. I know we will be. I have to follow up with everybody because I have a couple of ideas for future episodes. So I'll hop on that Twitter group chat. I don't know who manages your Twitter account for Guardians, but I will follow up.
Yeah, that one is Joe. I think I joined in with my own personal one.
Okay, makes sense. Makes sense. And hopefully we can get Dr. Scarlett on the next one. I know she's always been unavailable the last couple of times we've recorded, so hopefully we can get her in. So as we go through the wrap-up housekeeping, recommended reading for Northstar is Alpha Flight 106, the coming out issue, and Astonishing X-Men number 51, which is his marriage to Kyle. So both excellent issues, and then generally just read Alpha Flight and some of the latter Astonishing X-Men books where he is a major part of the cast, and you can get a feel for how he fits in an ensemble. So upcoming episodes, next week we talk to Erica Schultz, writer of Forgotten Home, which just finished up on Comixology. So this will be her third appearance on the show. And so we're looking forward to that. And then we will move to Raphael from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. and then support systems in comics, as suggested by Matt. So, Dr. Goku, why don't you just give us a quick rundown again of GuardiansMH, all your plugs, social media, where they can find you all?
Sure. So, like I had mentioned earlier, so GuardiansMH is a 501c3 nonprofit. We're mainly based on Discord, but you can pretty much find us everywhere. Easiest place is on Twitter, GuardiansMH. We have our website, guardiansmh.org. Our Discord, where you can find the peer support network. There's also the RTS bot that you can integrate to your own Discord channel or Twitch channel. And we're working on a bunch of stuff as well. So to hopefully be announced in the coming weeks/months.
Excellent. Looking forward to that. Very, very cool. And you can find the RTS bot in our Discord server as well. So as we said earlier at the top of the show, it's just a fantastic resource. Looking forward to using it in Discord. And we don't Twitch much. I may be doing some Twitch streaming later on this year for Extra Life, and I'll see if I can incorporate the RTS bot. But I only have like maybe 3 people who follow me, so it's not really going to do much of anything. But you can find our Discord at tinyurl.com/capesdiscord, capital C, capital D. Our website is capesonthecouch.live. We are Capes on the Couch on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We've got a TeePublic site. Later on this month, we will be having a sale. I believe it's June 17th is the start of the sale. Everything will be up to 35% off on our TeePublic site, so you can check out the cool merch. We've got both our logo as well as the Because Comics stuff, so you can get some stuff on there. And we've got our Patreon site, as we mentioned at the top of the show, brand new patron. So thank you to my sister Angela for joining. And I think that about does it. So thank you once again to Dr. Goku from GuardiansMH for joining us. Doc Issues, I know you're waiting, sitting eagerly with your pun to end the episode.
I'd just like to say it's always great to have other mental health professionals on the show, because even Northstar can use a little extra guidance now and then.
And there it is. For Dr. Goku and Dr. Issues, I'm Anthony Sitko. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.
Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.